All right, so the features of Git that make it so amazing and so good for source management is that, number one, as we've already talked about, it's distributed. We have copies of that repository all over the place for safety. And on top of that, it also is really good for distributed development. So what this means is that instead of having a local team sitting in an office with desks all near each other, all working on that source code and having the ability to instantly talk to each other about which files they're working on and who's making edits to what file in order to avoid conflicts in what they're working on. Instead, with Git and its powerful merging feature where you can merge software and detect the problems that might happen when people are working on the same source file, it actually allows us to spread out our development team across locations, across continents, around the world, and have really good remote development ability because of its features. The next advantage is it has strong support for nonlinear project development. What this means is that instead of having a piece of software that you begin developing here and it is just a straightforward development process with everybody working in a continuous linear fashion, instead what happens is we have the ability to now, using branching and merging, to have a main linear line of how the software is being developed, but we can actually branch off and have different sub-teams or different teams of developers working on different things. And usually these are called features in the software. So we can have one team break off into a branch and work on a particular feature while another team continues to work on the main line of the software. And we can break off as many as we want, and then we can have all of that merged back into the main line when we're ready to push our software somewhere, either to a testing environment or to production. So this becomes extremely important, especially in today's super complex systems where we have hundreds, if not thousands, of features that need to be developed at the same time, but end up needing to be back into that one stream of software. Another really important feature of Git is its efficiency in handling large projects. And by large projects, I mean projects that have hundreds or thousands or even millions of files with billions of lines of code. And the reason why it's so efficient is that instead of loading and unloading entire files at a time or pushing and pulling those files to and from the repositories, instead it is looking at files from a binary standpoint and only pushing and pulling the bits that have changed in that file at any given time, which makes those payloads that are going back and forth between the repository and the developer extremely small. And it also makes it so the repository does not grow as fast based on the fact that it's keeping versions of those changes over time. So it actually, those repositories end up being a lot smaller than repositories from like SVN, where it's an entire file that actually gets versioned. An additional feature that makes Git extremely helpful for software development is the fact that every change that happens and is pushed from a developer to the repository is the fact that each and every one of those changes are cryptographically authenticated. In other words, every change takes the current developer who made that change and pushed it into the repository. It takes their SSH key, it takes who they are, and it cryptographically signs their change and then pushes it to the server. Therefore, any change that is made to the repository can actually be tied back to the user and the machine that made that change to the source.